Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. I want to thank Dr. Michael Fine, who Skyped into us from Austin, Texas earlier, talking about the new number of cases and what some of the trends he sees, especially worried about the increased number of hospitalizations tied to the coronavirus. But let's go to the University of Virginia's Jennifer Lawless. She is the chair of the Political Science Department at Jefferson's University. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm happy to join you.
Lots of national news. Let's start with Joe Biden has left the basement. He is actively having events around the country. Donald Trump is having indoor, maskless campaign events. What does the last week say to you about this presidential campaign?
Well, I think it should first quell Democrats' concerns that Joe Biden was planning on not campaigning at all. So although the campaign looks a lot different than Trump's campaign, there's no question that both he and Kamala Harris have been out and about and going to important states, important areas within those states, and meeting with voters. The juxtaposition between the way that they're holding their campaign events and the Trump team is also clearly deliberate. And I think it sends a very obvious signal to voters that if you're worried about the coronavirus, if you are worried about people not wearing masks, if you are worried about the continuation of infection, then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the candidates for you, because Donald Trump's campaign events right now look like they did in January and February of last year.
Does the sitting president, get any points politically with undecided voters by saying, we are charging ahead, we're going to restore the economy, we're going to bring people's jobs back, we're going to get America moving again?
Well, the problem with that argument is that it was under his watch that America stopped moving. Now, that's not to say that he was responsible for the coronavirus, and if he would have actually implemented a plan that would have addressed it earlier on, I don't think he would be paying the price that he is now among Democrats and some independents. But it's very difficult to make the case that you're the one to get the economy moving, you're the one to reopen the country, when the country closed and the economy slowed under your watch. The other thing I would note is Donald Trump said last night during an ABC town hall that Joe Biden said he wants a mask mandate. Where's this mask mandate? It's like Donald Trump forgot that he's the incumbent president. You know, he's running the exact same campaign that he ran in 2016, and he thinks that his opponent has national authority to impose mandates, because that was the kind of message that really would have resonated 4 years ago. So I think he's sort of stuck and not really sure how to navigate this incumbency status.
The week, last 10 days, who won them?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, the last 10 days in this presidential campaign, from a trend standpoint, which campaign won the last 10 days?
I would say that Joe Biden won the last 10 days for two reasons. The first is that he was able to inoculate that Trump campaign argument that he's stuck in the basement. So that's going to fall flat. And the other thing that I think was a problem for Donald Trump was the Bob Woodward book. So between those two sets of dynamics, it's hard to say that Trump had a great week. Also, great 10 days. The other thing I would note, too, is Trump's approval rating seems basically stuck. The Republicans are almost all on board and will support him, but you can't win an election with 42% of the vote. And being 7 weeks out, it's not clear that there's a strategy to get that extra 5% that he needs.
Does he get points for the Middle Eastern accords that seem to now be coming forward en masse, and they're significant for stabilizing the region?
Foreign policy-wise, yes. But we also know that most voters don't care that much about foreign policy. And frankly, when I was watching all of the coverage last night, as much attention as was devoted to the substance of these agreements was the fact that, once again, there was an event with world leaders and there was no social distancing, there were no masks, and there was a sort of obliviousness toward the coronavirus.
I am guessing you are not watching Fox or Newsmax, though. Let's go to the United States Senate races. There's still a bunch of jump balls out there. Do we get a sense of how the Republicans are going to be able to hold the Senate?
Well, I've said all along that if Biden wins, it becomes very difficult for the Republicans to hold the Senate because the presidential and Senate races sort of operate in tandem. That's not to say that Biden will win, the Democrats will win every Senate race. But, the Republicans are now almost 10 points down in Arizona, where Mark Kelly is really pulling ahead of Martha McSally. Susan Collins is polling several points behind Sarah Gideon in Maine. And in Colorado, Cory Gardner and John Hickenlooper are neck and neck. But what's really interesting is that, I don't know, I think something like $27 million in outside money poured into the race just in the last couple of weeks to paint both of them as horrible people. So, there are some contests out there. But, I think ultimately it comes down to whether this is a Biden or Trump election.
Do you get a sense of, are they both horrible people there, both Senate candidates in Colorado?
I think that they're probably both less horrible than the ads paint them.
Let's go down to the University of Virginia. You're back at it. Colleges are reopening at different paces and in different structures. The Big Ten, I believe, voted today to reverse course, and they just couldn't stand watching Notre Dame football play, and have announced that they're going to start up their football season sometime in October, despite the fact that Michigan State has 400 positive cases of coronavirus as we speak. How are things going at the University of Virginia?
I think we have a COVID tracker, and I think as of this morning, which was based on Monday's data, we have something like 375 cases. And so, life is going on and chugging forward, but these numbers are continuing to creep up. The issue, of course, is what we're doing with students who test positive. And in terms of quarantine rooms and isolation rooms, we're nowhere close to capacity. So, I think it's not as much, the concern isn't so much around the number of positive tests, as long as there's something that can be done with the students and the faculty who test positive. But nationwide, I think the numbers on college campuses are now in excess of 40,000. And so to just put that number into perspective, that's, an insane number of new cases among young people. And as long as they're contained on these college campuses, the effects are somewhat limited. But at some point, these kids are going to go home.
Right. Does, listen, there is an expectation, I think, by all reasonable public health experts that as the colder weather hits and people are more contained inside schools, inside offices, inside their homes, that we're going to see an increase in the number of cases. We're averaging around 40,000 new cases on a daily basis. I believe we've clicked over 200,000 deaths. Does this increased number of cases, I hate to put it in a political structure, but does this, the virus expanding, the implications being deeper and harsher, does that impact one of the presidential campaigns more than the other?
Well, I think that it depends on how cold this fall is and what late October looks like as we head into November. Because if we are going to be asking people to stand in line to cast their ballots, if there's still going to be quite a bit of attention to rallies where Trump is holding them now inside as opposed to outside, I think there are going to be clear discussions about the political implications. And I think that if it's a cold winter, a cold fall, that winds up hurting Donald Trump, because as more and more cases hit the books, and as we're still nowhere close to having a vaccine that's ready to be delivered to the nation and take effect, that's just one more dimension by which he hasn't solved this problem.
Yeah, let's just talk about the vaccination messaging. Seems like a big bet by Donald Trump to continuously say, not only are we going to have a vaccine that's going to be approved and imply that it's going to be in some level of distribution, but that it's going to happen as quickly as the November election. That seems, his own public health experts, Dr. Fauci and others, seem to discount that the likelihood of a vaccine being approved and ready is very, very low. Your thoughts?
I defer to the public health experts on this. I think it is unlikely. The other thing I would note here is that the efficacy of the vaccine is an unknown, and best case scenario from what I've heard is we're looking at a vaccine is considered very, very successful if it would have like a 75% efficacy rate, which means that 25% of people with the virus it will not work for. And that's assuming everybody gets vaccinated. The other thing that I would keep in mind here too is that the same way that masks have become politicized, trust in a potential vaccine has become politicized because Donald Trump seems to say whatever he thinks voters want to hear. And as a result, Democrats are decreasingly likely to say that under Donald Trump's watch, they would be willing to take this vaccine. And that's a scary prospect as well. Just like there was no reason that the mask issue should have split along party lines, there's certainly no reason for a vaccine to divide that way, except that the national conversation is leading voters in that direction.
What should we be looking for? Final question, what should we be looking for over the next week, 10 days?
Well, I'm particularly interested in these Senate investigations into Trump's political opponents. The Senate today decided that they are going to investigate on some dimensions and not on others. Mitt Romney came out in a pretty forceful statement today and said that he thinks it's ridiculous and inappropriate for the Senate to be launching investigations into Joe and Hunter Biden 7 weeks before an election. That's just not the responsibility or the role of the Senate or that committee. And so, my bet is that the Republicans are going to try to do everything they possibly can to throw as much at the wall as they possibly can, and they'll see what sticks. The problem for the Republicans, especially those running for the Senate and the House, is that Donald Trump is going to be out on the campaign trail and speaking in a non-disciplined way far more often over the course of the next 7 weeks than he has been in the past. And that creates a tension because he doesn't stay on message.
I lied, not the last question. Last question, first debate, how big a political marker is this in this campaign?
Debates typically don't matter that much. Most people have already made up their minds. In this case, a lot of people will already cast their ballots. I'm voting on Friday, so that's September 18th, almost 2 months before the election and before the first debate. I do think it's about ensuring both sides to the American people that they're competent and able to make it through 2 hours. Right, the stakes are so high, but the expectations are so low that it's hard to imagine what a colossal failure would look like. And both sides are trying to play down expectations. The Trump campaign has said that Donald Trump is not practicing at all. He just practices on a daily basis. I've spoken to some debate experts who assure me that he's practicing a lot. And the Biden campaign is basically suggesting that Joe Biden takes these things very seriously, but he's not the best debater in the world. And so I guess the bar becomes how low can we go?
Do they play the national anthem before the debates? And will Joe Biden take a knee?
I think he won't. I do think that he'll be wearing a mask until he has to speak, though. I think the mask. The mask now sort of symbolizes the main division in our culture.
And will it have a message on the front of the mask? Biden 2020, Donald sucks. What exactly will
Wouldn't that be amazing? I feel like our political leaders are not using masks the way that they could be. There's no reason for them not to be campaigning with these masks in a very exciting, out front kind of way. But no, it'll probably just be like a neighbor.
You could have a little hand arrow and say, "Don't listen to dummy" or something like that, right? They could play this up into
stupid,
very exciting
like something,
ways.
right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And then wouldn't the whole world be shaken up if Donald Trump not only wore a mask, but kept it on during the entire debate? That would shake up.
Yes, but what I would say is so crazy about that statement is that that should not be a crazy statement, right? If we look at the science and if we look at what's gone on over the course of the last 6 months, that should actually be what happens. And that we're now thinking that that would be the most outlandish thing that would happen during this debate, I think epitomizes how far we've come in terms of working together to come up with a solution.
Well, listen, let's enjoy it in 6 weeks or so. After that, we'll be talking about with you who's going to be the Secretary of Energy, right? So either in the second Trump term or in Joe Biden's inaugural term. So I'm going to enjoy the next few weeks and hope everybody else will. Jennifer, as always, thank you so much. For everyone else, Gina Raimondo is holding a press briefing. We'll get an update from the governor. Also stay tuned for significant updates on the 610 investigation of contaminated soil being brought to that site. It's a $410 million public works project, one of the biggest in Rhode Island's history, and there's lots of questions to be asked by the state as well as the contractor Barletta out of Massachusetts, tied to a number of other issues around New England. Thanks everybody. Stay tuned, stay safe, and please wear your mask.